On this episode of the John 1911 podcast, we're going to do something a little different. On the way home from the range, Doc and I had a nice conversation about precision rifles and super secret CIA ammo.
Start over. All right. So you look at
Go to collinear
multicollinearity, where variables are correlated with one another, and because of that, you may get a false reading of the importance of certain variables in some type of an experimental operation.
Yeah.
And a case in point I was going to use is the one-hit stops in that paper that I wrote a number of years ago with the one-hit stops versus a number of different parameters. Amongst them were velocity, mass of the bullet, kinetic energy, and I forget what else offhand. I'd have to go review that paper now because I wrote it over 10 years ago. And you'll find that the mass and the velocity and the kinetic energy all have a strong contributor to the stopping power in terms of this one-hit stop measurement. Well, then you dive into it. The kinetic energy is 1/2 of the mass times the square of the velocity. And you realize that the mass and the velocity and the kinetic energy are all correlated.
Yes.
So is it the mass? Is it the velocity? Is the kinetic energy? So then you have to rely on your knowledge of the physics or the chemistry of the situation. And that is, kinetic energy is what is required to break bonds. In other words, to rip apart tissue, to do all the damage that a bullet does. So that's why the kinetic energy does seem to give a marginally higher correlation than the other two, because they are not as good a measure of the kinetic energy. So that is a case where, yes, they were highly correlated, but then you dug a little deeper into it, and you could say, well, it probably is, in fact, was the kinetic energy is the issue. And if I just correlate it with that and ignore the mass and the velocity, I will explain things as effectively as I can, with some remaining uncertainty, which is to be expected. And you effectively have putting together a story of why bullets perform the way they do. So that's the idea behind multicollinearity. And where the problem comes in is when you don't know things are collinear, or it's collinear with something that you haven't even measured, that is lurking out there that you don't know. That's another problem. As I said, medical people get into that.
The problem. Logical unknown unknowns.
The logical unknown knowns, if you will.
Oh, the unknown knowns. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
You know there's an unknown, as opposed you don't know.
Right.
You don't know.
I mean, you might, and I can't give you a good medical example because that's not my field, but I do know that a lot of things can happen, and things are correlated, and that's one of the reasons. Like I was just at my doctor, my physician, about a month ago. It's been a month now, and we were talking about it briefly, and he said, "Yeah, medicine, in many ways, is an art. I mean, engineering is an art. It's a science, but it's also an art. But I think there's more art in medicine, and particularly in the day-to-day practice of it, because there's so many variables, and you really have to understand the medical issues rather than just the effect of X on Y for a lot of the treatments that people, that the physicians might want to apply."
I can't remember the paper. Who was that for? Like, what was that? Who was that for? John, or who was that?
That was for. I wrote it as part of my, part of my employment, if you will. And I wrote two papers. I wrote a version that was, and I thought was pretty much tried to simplify it as much as I could. Probably could have simplified it further in retrospect. And then I wrote another one that was really intended for more. It's more of an esoteric paper. It really delved into the analysis that I did to try to explain the behavior we were seeing, and why velocity was actually more important driver than was the mass. And of course, the kinetic energy was the driver that we found in that. And of course, the most important thing in the kinetic energy is the velocity, because the energy goes up as the square of the velocity.
Yes.
So that's why I wrote that paper. Well, that's what I found in the paper, and I wrote it to try to document everything that I had seen.
Do you still have that paper?
Yes.
You want to send me a copy of it?
Yeah, I'll send you both copies.
All right.
Yeah, I'll try to remember to do that tonight. Are you recording this?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to know. That's all right. That's fine.
Hey, look. I mean this in the most academic way possible. You are fucking amazing. And, we've all learned so much from you. And it needs to be documented for posterity. Because, you can't rely on, me, Mike, and Dave to recall, all the stuff that you've tried to teach us. Because it'll all get jacked up.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, but it seems like it's pretty. It's falling off a lot. It's fairly straightforward, but it's a multicollinearity, which is the statistical term, is something you have to deal with and be aware of it when you're doing these particularly multivariate studies, where you have a number of X's that may be contributing to the overall response. And when you think you have all the bases covered, you can see that with as I was telling you earlier before you recorded, through the correlation matrix, which are all things that are reported in a statistical package. And this is getting way off the rails for the average shooter, but it's something of interest.
It is. Are you still... What was the bullet we were shooting down in Texas and you didn't like the performance? Are you still shooting that? The TTSX bullet?
No, I like that bullet a lot. No, there was a bullet... No, I think what happened is I thought maybe that it penetrated hog and didn't hit any bone structure, may not have expanded. And of course, that was highly circumstantial information. It was based on
a sample size of one.
Sample size of one. They've had more experience with those TTSXs, and they're awesome. Those Barnes bullets really work. They really, really work, and they hold together. And the only thing you have to be careful with them is they're longer because they're copper, so they're not as heavy. The nickel term is the overall density is lower because there's no lead with them. So they have to make them longer to get the equivalent weight. And sometimes the bullets get too long, and they may not be stable.
You have to have a faster barrel. Yeah, a lot of people don't. A lot of people forget that all things being equal, a heavier bullet will be a longer bullet, because if the mass is the same and it's
the lighter bullet will be long. Oh, the heavier bullet.
Will be longer.
Yes.
Yeah. What's the round that I'd heard rumors? I don't know if you were talking about it or if it was coming from Mike. There's a supposedly hot shit round that one of the military units is using, and they won't admit it, but it's basically a hunting round.
Well,
is that the TTSX bullet?
TTSX bullet that nobody will admit that they're loading it for, I believe, either the Special Operations Community or the CIA. And it's a 70 grain 223 that's being loaded for, as I say, allegedly not by Barnes, but by
I think it's Black Hills, right?
Black Hills is what I understand, but that's all rumor. It's
I've heard variations of this from people that actually know their bullets for a while. I don't think it's common knowledge, at least on the internet, but it's and it's an example of the marketing versus the people. If it's black and tactical, it's the best thing ever, and if it's dirty civilian hunting stuff, it's just FUD ammo. And it's like, well, that's not really true, because hunters are very concerned with terminal performance.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
you know, last I checked, you know, people or animals. So, you know, I just always thought that was super interesting.
Yes.
What was the, because this one had come up in the past, and I could never really explain it thoroughly. This came up on the range today. You have talked about how super heavyweight 308 bullets are hard to get to work in the AR-10 because the system unlocks faster. And you had a theory that I think one of the specialty ammo houses, why you've never seen the specialty ammo in the 308 as opposed to they've got it in like the Mark 18 or whatever it is for the 5.56, is because they can't get it to work in an AR-10. Do I have that right?
Well, what I have seen is the AR-10 platform tends to be, from what I understand, I don't know this from personally, but from what I understand, tends to be very finicky, tends to be overgassed. And what happens is if you have any kind of a higher pressure round, the bullets, there's a lot of a lot of pressure in the chamber, and of course, as the bullet travels down the barrel, and there's high enough pressure, so obviously you get some gas that fills the gas tube, and it's a direct impingement system, and it forces the bolt open. Well, you get sufficient amount of gas at high enough pressure because of a warmer load that you can get the action to open up too soon. The consequence is you can get ejected primers.
Yes.
So you have too much pressure in the chamber still. The chamber opens up and the primers can just be pushed out. And this is opposed to primers that are pushed out because of weakening of the brass because of excessive pressure. Rather, this is because there's just too much pressure in the residual pressure, if you will, in the cartridge case. When the bullet opens,
Or when the bolt unlocks.
When the bolt unlocks, and it causes these ejected primers to occur. And then, of course, that can be a problem because sometimes it can cause a stoppage from the firearm. They get caught in the bolt area or in the trigger area.
Yeah, primer comes out of a case. It can kill a gun. Like it can kill it completely.
I've seen them. They even get into where the bolt locks up into the barrel nut.
And sticking a suppressor on the system with the DI just makes it all even worse.
Makes it worse.
So that's why you've never seen, I don't believe, unless you correct me, I don't believe there's ever really been a successful, well, I would call it a hot shit ninja round for the 308 that's been adopted by the military.
What I
M1110
understand is that the Army wanted to use a 175 grain match bullet in the 308 in the approach. And again, this is hearsay. I saw it written somewhere, but the Army approached Black Hills and asked them to develop a load with they wanted a certain velocity out of the 308, 175 grain load in the AR-10 platform. May have been
I think it's the M1110
the S25, is it?
SR25
SR25,
yeah.
But at any rate, I don't know exactly what happened. They may have actually came up with some type of
was the SR25 a piston gun? Because what's the SAS, the SASS, or I can't remember. I'm not that up on my AR-10s. I can't remember. I think whatever it was, it's a DI gun. It's not a piston gun, I believe, right?
The problem is with the DI guns. The piston guns, I think they can manage them more effectively.
Well, also, I mean, not incidentally, Big Army, I believe, picked up the Super Shorty HK AR-10 variant for I don't know what they call it. I can't remember what they call it, but that's their dedicated 308 semi-auto now.
Is it really?
It's definitely a DI gun. Okay. It's short. It's much shorter than the original one, and it's definitely a DI gun. I mean, it's a piston gun.
So, probably because it's more suppressor friendly, we shoot the heavier bullets too.
Maybe you're right. But the Army wanted, I know they wanted the 175 grain because apparently the 168 grain, well, I know this from my own experience, it goes onto at 1,000 yards, it's just about going transonic. It varies just a little bit on either side of 1,000 yards. And the Army wanted to push that envelope a little further. Now this is a number of years old, and I don't know, the Army's apparently done a lot of looking at stuff, and they've got a bunch of different calibers they've looked at and different things. And so I don't know exactly what they're doing now or what they've dropped and all that. So I don't know.
Well, we know, I'm not going to mention his name, but we know a police sniper who had gone to the FBI Academy at Quantico with his 168 grain ammo, and that range is basically at sea level, and his 168 was just dying down there at range because it was just crushing him. Like back here he was doing fine with it, but down there closer to the ocean,
that's right,
his 168s were just they were just falling apart.
Well, I know I shot 168s at 1,000 yards at Camp Perry a number of years ago, and they were just going transonic at 1,000 yards because the people who were scoring my target later on told me that they were starting to keyhole.
Okay.
It wasn't a full keyhole, as I recall, but they were.
That's really good for 308.
Yeah.
I mean, 308 is realistically not truly, in my opinion, 1,000-yard round. I mean, I've shot at 1,000 yards, and I've had success with it. But it was up in the mountains, and you're kind of, in my opinion, you're kind of fudging it a little bit to get it out there. It's
1,000 yards, you're right on the edge.
Yeah, you're not getting out there with a lot of ass left over.
You're right on the edge of that. So I don't know, what the status is. From what I gather, the Army has gone through a number of iterations on what they're looking for. I think they're taking some of their cues from the civilian market. I think they're also looking at what they think they need, and I suspect that they're using different firearms for different applications. And what I mean by that is, if they think that they're having a longer range scenario that they'll encounter, then they might take a 300 Winchester or maybe something like a 300 Norma or 338 Norma.
Yeah.
Or some of their.
From what I'm hearing, because we talked about this earlier, it looks like Army is moving away from 50 BMG for anti-material, and they're doing 338 Norma, and they might even be moving, if I have this right, from 300 Winchester to 300 Norma, because that's really where they want to get their long range.
I think they've also looked at the 300 precision rifle for Portland.
300 PRC, yeah, I don't know if they've. I think there's some possibility that could still be adopted, but especially in the platforms that because they're going back to bolt guns, because they're realizing that semi-automatic is great for urban multi-shot engagements, but if you're shooting at long distance, just the flight time and the time to call corrections, you can work a bolt. And a bolt gun, as we talked about with the AR-10s, a bolt gun is much more forgiving on bullet weight, and it's much more forgiving on caliber changes, and it's way more forgiving on suppressors.
Yes.
And so it's kind of interesting to see the bolt gun come back. It's not all sweetness and light with those semi-automatic sniper rifles.
My personal opinion is that urban sniping, maybe some other scenarios where the engagement's going to be not at very distant ranges. When I'm saying distant ranges, beyond 800 yards, which means it could be more than that, because you really never know exactly what it's going to encounter. But where you believe that it's going to be beyond some intermediate range value, stay with a larger caliber gun. Go with a bolt gun. And plus that, not only is the bolt gun more forgiving, larger caliber firearm is also much better to deal with in any kind of a wind. Like today we were shooting, we had probably about a 5 to 8 mile an hour wind. That
it was pushing you around at 518 yards, 517.
I needed about a 1 MOA correction on that target. What I looked at, I didn't bother to put it on, but I see that I needed about a minute of angle, and that's a 300 Winchester. I would have been, the 308 would have been pushed. I would have been pushing that around a little more, and if I'd had a 338 Lapua or something of that sort, it would even have been less effective. And as bigger, heavier calibers, it may not be more overkill in terms of stopping for the
internal performance or whatever you're trying to
what
hit.
You're trying to do is ensure that in fact you are making a hit, and those 338s with 250 or 300 grain bullet really do resist deflection by the wind better than like those 208 grain bullets that I'm shooting today, and certainly better than a 168 grain 308 or
sure,
a 155 grain that I have to shoot my scar.
I wonder, going back to the Barrett MRAD, and which is the new gun that the Army's decided to go with, the bolt action with 300 normal magnum, 338 normal magnum. It looks to me that the U.S. Army might be going away, even if they never really adopted it that much, from the 338 Lapua, because I think 338 Lapua was the 338 Lapua was obviously the hot shit round for reaching out. It wasn't a 50. It's not like 50 TBI is what we would call it. But I think people were having, I believe, the 338 Lapua, people were having issues shooting the heavier bullets, and it looked like the sweet spot with 338 Lapua was about 250 or so, 225. And it's like, well, you're not that much really, more than the 300 Win Mag at that rate too. And so I think that might be part of the reason why the 300 Norma Magnum and 338 Norma Magnums are kind of really picking up. And I wonder if those are going to end up becoming NATO standards within the next 10 years.
They might. That's, by the way, I did not know that about the 338 Lapua having an issue with shooting 300 grain bullets. Is it a twist rate issue, or is it?
I think it's a twist rate issue.
Okay.
I mean, I obviously don't reload, so I'm not certain. I just know people that shoot that quite a lot. They've realized, they've come out and said that, yeah, for success with 338, don't shoot the super heavies because they're having some issues with them. And like, I remember, and I'm not going to say the person's name, but the last rifle that was being proposed for the new Army sniper rifle, or the military sniper rifle, I don't say which branch, but a mutual friend of ours was out at Crane. He was part of that project, and we ran into him. And, like I asked him some questions, and one thing he had said, and this was about a decade ago, he had said that it looked like the guys at Crane were interested in, I don't remember if he said 300 Norma Magnum or 338 Norma Magnum.
I think it was the 338 Norma.
And he said it looks like they're like in 338. And I remember him saying that, and that was realistically the first time I had ever heard of 338 Norma Magnum, is when he said that. And I was like, what the hell?
Yeah, we were both there, and that was the first time I'd heard of a 338 Norma.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't feel like that much of a heel then. If you didn't know what it was,
I didn't know what it was.
Then
I'd heard of it.
I shall stand in your shadow on that one. I think there's a lot of room. There's a lot of growth potential, I think, between the 300 Winchester and 338 Norma Magnum. I think there's going to be a lot of serious caliber development, load development, gun development, because 300 PRC is obviously in there as well, or 30 PR. What is 300 PRC? Which we have one of those from J. Sip and Sons. But a lot of people like the 338 Lapua. It's kind of sucks. I mean, it's a thumper. it's not, then the 50's definitely a thumper. People would prefer to have a round that's more performance oriented, not just, I'd call horsepower, that, kills on one end and kind of thumps you on the other, because it does degrade the shooter.
I don't enjoy shooting a 50. I like to shoot, but the 50, if somebody wants me to shoot it for a particular reason, I will do it. But just to go out and shoot a 50, even it was the M82 from Barrett, which is a really soft recoiling round, because it's semi-automatic. I just don't enjoy it. It just
gives you a headache.
There's a little bit of a concussion that one sees every time you shoot it.
Yeah. The joke is we can call it 50 TBI, the traumatic brain injury.
Yeah,
that's what we say, 50 TBI, because I remember. I remember. I won't say where, but I think you and I were together, and a mutual friend of ours, he was getting a gun. He was getting a Barrett sighted in, because I think they had something to do with a detail, and they needed it for Overwatch, and he was shooting it from behind. Basically, it was like, "Hey, Doc, we're gonna be shooting over you with the 50," and we're like, "Okay." And I remember this thing was just thumping the hell out of me. Like, maybe I have wussy baby ears, but I was just like, "Good Lord." The concussion was rocking me.
They're not fun. I don't enjoy shooting them, and I certainly make sure that I'm either right behind the shooter or a good distance away from him. To me, it's not pleasant. They are devastating when they hit. I will say they are devastating, but unless I have to shoot one, I really don't want to do it.
Oh, I should show you these photographs if I can find them. Years ago, when we were running the t-shirt business, we had a guy send us photographs. He was whitetail hunting with a 50. And it was like, ooh, I want to see that. Like, I don't want to do that once, and it's like once is enough. But yeah, I want to see that once. It was like, oh man, talk about meat loss. That's an instant European mount right there.
It's devastating.
Yeah.
This is tremendous. There's something like 12,000 foot-pounds of kinetic energy in it, which is
and you know that
4 times out of a 30-06.
And you know that off the top of your head.
Well, yeah, I didn't calculate it. I actually happen to know that. It's about 12,000 foot-pounds.
So, interesting. It's just one of those, but I think it's like I always noticed in the civilian market, because I think it's a telltale sign of what's been happening in the military side. People will buy these calibers because if it's good enough for the Army, it's good enough for me. If it's good enough for the Marine Corps, it's good enough for me. And like, you go on some of these higher end precision rifle forums and you go into the for sale section, and you always find used 338 Lapuas for sale with like hardly any rounds in them. It's like, that's a clue. Yeah, nobody likes shooting those.
I've shot them. I don't mind shooting the 338 Lapua.
With the suppressor?
No, I shot it with had a muzzle brake on it.
Okay.
But what I shot, I shot it at Camp Atterbury. We went over there for training a number of years ago, and we had a wind every bit of 20 miles an hour, full crosswind, a full value wind. And each of us shot this 338 Lapua. Each of us, that would be 3 of us. There was more.
Were you shooting in a tank out there?
It was an armored personnel carrier.
Okay.
It was a mile away, and no kidding, no fooling. We were told it was a mile away, and in fact, we verified it. And each of us hit this thing on the second shot in this wind. I mean, it was very impressive what it could do, but it was, but it did have the muzzle brake on it. I wouldn't want to shoot it without a muzzle brake.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed,
and I don't know what weight bullet I was shooting. I I don't know which way the bullet was.
Yeah.
In the firearm.
I've got some in the armory. I need to get a, as our range is so short, we only have really maximum about a 700-yard shot in our range, really functionally 6, and 338 Lapua is so overkill for that.
It's not even getting. I mean, my 300 Winchester, it's just really getting loosened up.
Yeah, and like the barrel I've got for the Blazer, I got a 338 barrel, and I've got loaded ammo for it, and I need to get a suppressor, but it kind of sucks just logistically because it's a 38 caliber suppressor, not a 30.
Yep.
So that sucks. Then you got to have all this money tied up in a gun, and you're really not shooting that much. But I've even noticed a lot of the guys on the tactical teams in this region, they've been slowly going away from the 50 and going in, paying more attention to the 338, because the 338 will do for their application everything that they would want at their worst case ridiculous scenario that they're never going to have to deal with. And they can do the 338 and they get more accuracy out of it and more repeatability, and it's better all around than it is the 50s.
I'd agree with that statement, because I know the guys are thinking about retiring in their 50s.
Yeah, I know one that's unofficially for sale now. It was offered to us, but I turned it down.
It was, sometimes it's bank glass, it can be very thick, and if you've got a hostage situation where you have to go through the bank glass or something like that, the 50 is great, but it's really very limited application. And on top of that, you're shooting off this big round, usually in an urban or a near urban environment, and the collateral damage that can occur is something to be considered.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not a big fan of those things.
All right. Well, Doc, I'm going to let you off the hook. We'll go ahead and end this one because we're getting pretty close to home. And
Okay.
It was a good conversation, and hopefully we'll do more of these in the future.